Greetings from Washington, D.C. I'm Bill Clifford, President and CEO of the World Affairs Councils of America, and it's my pleasure to bring you this edition of Embassy Row Live, our distinguished diplomatic series that we present nationwide with ambassadors, top diplomats, and visiting dignitaries to the United States. Today's guest is Dr. Asad Majeed Khan. He's the ambassador of the Islamic Republic of Pakistan to the United States, where he's served since January of 2019. He has a long career with the Pakistani Foreign Ministry in several postings abroad and at home. What I'm particularly interested in is just prior to this post, he served as Pakistan's ambassador to Japan. And we were both in language training at the same time in the early 90s. He in Tokyo, I think, and I was here in Washington at SAIS. But Ambassador, you bring a broad experience, having also served in diplomatic postings in various countries in Central Asia, West Africa. You've been at the permanent mission of Pakistan to the United Nations in several different appointments concerning Economic and Social Council, the chairmanship of the G77 at the UN Conference for Sustainable Development, and of course, your ambassador to the United States at a point where we are marking 75 years of the bilateral Pakistan-US relationship. So welcome to Embassy Row Live.
Thank you very much, Mr. Clifford, for hosting me this afternoon. I am greatly honored to be part of the Embassy Row series of conversations that you have with Washington-based diplomats. And certainly I've had the pleasure and honor of interacting with World Affairs Councils around the United States, but this is the first time for me to do it here in Washington, D.C. So I'm very grateful to you for giving me this opportunity. And as we discover, there is a lot more that we would probably like to discuss off camera about our experience in Japan and our common love for that beautiful country. And I look forward to doing that. But obviously today, there are so many other things I'm sure on your agenda today. So I look forward to an interesting exchange.
Well, thank you again. And in fact, Ambassador, we have about 150 people joining us from around the country at councils and their members, and also some folks from as far away as Ghana in West Africa and Punjab in South Asia. So it is a worldwide audience. And we welcome questions from anybody who can post in our Q&A and chat boxes. Either one is fine. We'll be monitoring them. And typically I go through sort of a conversation with you, sir, but I have to say, you've generated more questions. I have 3 pages of questions from my council leader colleagues and their members that have been pre-submitted, which is the highest number I've seen, and I want to make sure to get to them right away. And they're on a variety of subjects. Probably the top area of interest concerns Afghanistan and your relationship, your country's relationship with that country, particularly since the U.S. withdrawal and conclusion of the Afghan war. So why don't we start there? And if you would please let us know what you see being the principal challenges of your country vis-a-vis Afghanistan and the region in this very volatile and uncertain global context.
Thank you very much. And I think you are very right in starting off with Afghanistan, because frankly, that remains the primary and principal conversation track between United States and Pakistan. And that also remains our primary and principal concern for a variety of reasons. But let me say that today, unfortunately, the humanitarian situation in Afghanistan is really bad. And I wouldn't be wrong if I term it almost as a ticking time bomb, because of a country that essentially depended on foreign assistance for almost past 20 years. That source having been taken away, a country that has faced a consistent drought and right now is in the middle of severe winter. That situation is a source of deep concern for us because on the security front, clearly we can see that Taliban have been able, the authorities in Afghanistan have been able to control and bring the law and order under control. And today, perhaps for the first time in 40 years, we see that the nocturnal traffic is back on the roads and you can actually travel from Peshawar to Kabul even during the night time. Overall, the security situation, the hotels, restaurants in Kabul are also open. People feel safe and free to go around. But on the economic front, it's really, and the linkage, of course, the international community has come forward in providing the much needed urgent humanitarian assistance. But frankly, humanitarian assistance alone would not work because unless and until we are able to help Afghanistan's economy get back on its feet, we will not be able to see long-term sustainable peace. And for us, really, the linkage between an economic meltdown and the security implications of that meltdown are what bothers us the most, because frankly, so far, we have not seen the kind of refugee outflows, frankly, which we were fearing. Still, there is, but if there is an economic meltdown, there are no jobs that people can get. There are no salaries that can be paid to those who are manning the infrastructure. This is going to basically lead to the meltdown of central authority, the emergence of ungoverned spaces where obviously those with power, means and resources would create their own militias. And we have seen that film play in the past also. And that is going to force people not just to come out to Pakistan, they will go wherever they can. So precisely for the reasons that or the consequences that we wish to avoid, I think it is very important for the international community to respond in a collective and effective and timely way to the challenges if we want to avoid the consequences. And the consequences are that no one wants to see Afghanistan be used as a safe haven for terrorism. We don't want Afghanistan to basically be also the source of drug production. We don't want refugees to flow out of Afghanistan. And if we want to avoid those consequences, it is really important for us to come together and really, in a way that the Security Council has passed a resolution. The US Treasury has come out with these general licenses. So the legal space, fortunately, is there, but banks are still reluctant to carry out transactions, and salaries for teachers are not being paid, for the health workers are not being paid. That is standing in the way of, and then the private sector. You know, banks, if I am an Afghan, I cannot even send money to my relatives in Pakistan. So money is being transported in cash, although that is changing, but the speed is really slow. So the challenge is to act fast to avoid the consequences.
Well, I want to address some of these issues. You seem to emphasize the need for economic assistance. We also have interesting comments from you on the humanitarian front, where a lot of our colleagues have questions. And then finally, we'll get to the political and security issue there before moving to other topics. So on the economic assistance front, what exactly is Pakistan doing to provide economic aid and support? And to what extent are you engaged in the diplomacy of working multilaterally to get international assistance to Afghanistan? How effective has that effort been? And who are the laggard countries in providing that aid?
Oh, we
Let's start with
are
Pakistan first.
absolutely. I think we are a poor country. First of all, because we are deeply concerned, because there is no other country that has borne the consequences of the conflict and instability in Afghanistan as much as we have. So, for our own or in our own self interest, we are almost desperate to see peace and stability in Afghanistan. We are also very keen to work with everyone ready and willing to engage in achieving the objectives that we seek to achieve in Afghanistan. So it is the immediate neighborhood, it is extended troika where United States, China, Russia join us in working on peace. We are working with the European Union also. So Pakistan, what we have done, we are acting as the humanitarian bridge for every assistance, the UN assistance going into Afghanistan, other sources from other countries also. We have ourselves committed over $30 million to provide the much needed food and related support. We are also providing the health capacity building. We are also providing them with the day-to-day needs in the health sector. We have also basically, Pakistan is actually, if you look at the Central Asian republics, they have sealed their borders. Pakistan is the only country where all the borders with all the crossing points with Afghanistan are open. The trading points with Afghanistan are open. We have removed our the tax levies, the tariffs, which has actually resulted in expansion of trade. And according to the United Nations, Taliban have actually earned close to $1 billion in terms of revenue, mostly through trade and then other means. And then that they have also fought corruption. But in terms of our own support, our national security advisor was in Kabul at the head of an interagency delegation, where we had a discussion on the whole host of issues. And not just that, as I said, that we have been working with the immediate neighbors because our concerns are shared. We also convened in December the OIC extraordinary meeting of the OIC Islamic Conference Foreign Ministers. And that conference also came up with this idea of creating a trust fund for Afghanistan. And I understand the modalities for that trust fund are being worked out, and hopefully the fund will be launched before the end of this month. What is interesting is that OIC's access in Afghanistan is also pretty effective. So all other countries who wish to contribute to the fund will be in a position to contribute also to help and facilitate. And not just that, I think what we have also done, where again, I think it's not about the authorities in Afghanistan, but it is about the Afghan people. Today, until so far, we have facilitated the evacuation of those wishing to leave Afghanistan. And it's close to about 100,000 Afghans and nationals from 47 countries. We are also still, there are many Afghans that are in transit. We would not designate them as refugees, the new arrivals, because even before their arrival, there are close to around 3 million, 2.5 to 3 million Afghan refugees that are being hosted by Pakistan now consistently for 40 years. So the long and short of it is that we are doing whatever we can to help our Afghan brothers. We are doing it because we know that the consequences of perpetual conflict and instability are going to impact Pakistan. And then those consequences are not just going to stay limited to Pakistan. they will go beyond. And that's the point that we are trying to make to our interlocutors everywhere, including here in Washington, D.C.
Our colleague Sarah Gall at World Orlando, which is our council affiliate in Central Florida, is asking exactly what are the latest migration numbers of Afghans crossing the border into Pakistan. And
As
many other councils are asking, how specifically do you assist in providing their secure and safe entry into your country?
Well, as I said, that obviously for anyone to get into Pakistan, they would need visas, and our embassies and consulates in Afghanistan are probably the only diplomatic posts that never cease to work, even in the immediate aftermath of August 15 also. And we have been issuing physical visas, we have been issuing electronic visas, we have also been facilitating those who for one or the other reason were not able to get visas, and they were allowed entry on arrival on our border posts, and we did not close those posts. Now, there are different categories. There are these routine movements across Pakistan-Afghan border where people come in and then they return. We have also seen some spike in the numbers of those coming into Pakistan. But still,
Can you give an estimate of the flow?
it's as I said that so far we have because it's really difficult to give you an exact number. I can tell you that we have so far facilitated the evacuation of over 100,000 people out of Pakistan. So maybe it would be a fair guess to say that maybe another 300,000 are in Pakistan, and sometimes these numbers are difficult to maintain. So I would not want to give you an exact number, but I can tell you that these are mostly those people who are coming into Pakistan, sometimes because of a promise or hope of moving to another destination. I think this is also happening through Iran, where many have actually transited through Iran into Turkey and to further destinations in Europe. So in Pakistan also. So the classic refugees who are leaving Afghanistan out of desperation and are going to be lodged in the camps is something that we have still not seen, although the number is trickling in, but they are mostly those who have perhaps their relatives on our side of the border, and or those who have been basically sponsored by various embassies and diplomatic missions. So that flow is continuing, and there are still charter flights operating out of Islamabad, taking those who wish to move to third country destinations.
I have a question I'm going to stay with this topic just a little bit longer. Amy Sins is asking, is there a plan to ease the ability and speed the time frame for someone wanting to obtain a visa from Afghanistan to enter your country?
Oh yes, I think we do. We have, as I said, the time frame is not that long. We have issued visas even in a day also, and those who come, and as I said, that even those who come in without visas are also being facilitated. And frankly, so far in our experience, even the Taliban authorities have not stopped anyone wishing to leave Afghanistan, particularly the foreign passport holders. They did have issues with Afghans leaving, and not because they saw them as basically representatives of the former government, but basically because their view was, at least in the beginning, that if everyone leaves, then who is going to run the infrastructure and essential services in Afghanistan? And also because they argued that we have announced a global amnesty, and we have not gone after anyone. So the people should not be scared or afraid. And so far, at least they claim that there are no reprisals. They claim that even if there are any, those are mostly as a result of local vendettas. That's not the policy that they are pursuing, and they would take action against those who are basically victimizing representatives from the past.
Very good. I want to talk about the Taliban and your relationship, your country's relationship with the Taliban. Pakistan was one of only 3 countries to recognize Taliban in the 1990s. And there seems to have been a policy shift in various media engagements. Prime Minister Imran Khan said that Pakistan won't be the first country to recognize the Taliban and would only do so alongside other countries. But he seemed to suggest in a recent CNN interview that there is support for recognizing the Taliban because the Afghan people are, quote, severely affected by non-recognition of the regime. So how close are you prepared to get? And do you think that the international community is ready to officially deal with the Taliban? Talk about Pakistan first.
I think you are right. Yes, we were one of the 3 countries that recognized Taliban when they were in government last time. And this time around, we've been very consistent in saying from the start that we will be working collaboratively with the international community and then coordinating with the international community in terms of deciding on the question of recognition. But I think we need to draw a clear and I would say an urgent distinction between recognition and engagement. And as long as there is engagement, because to recognize or not to recognize is a legal act that depends on who is actually in control and who the authorities are. But engagement is essentially driven by the considerations pertaining to the common Afghans and people of Afghanistan. And that engagement is continuing. And for now, non-recognition, at least so far as Pakistan is concerned, has not stood in the way of us engaging Afghan authorities and Afghan people in ways that would allow us to help them. So it's really a determination that we, outside of Afghanistan and members of the international community, have to make in terms of how far they are going to basically engage with Afghanistan to be able to help the people of Afghanistan who have suffered so much over the last 40 years. There has to, and this has to come to a stop. And if that engagement is not impacted by non-recognition, then that's really a subject that is very much on the table, but it's not really on the top of the files that I have on my table. For us, really, what is important is to avert the worsening of the humanitarian situation. For us, what is really urgent is to create conditions that would bring back the Afghan economy on its feet. For us, what is really important is to basically encourage Taliban to use and the authorities in Afghanistan to use their authority to rid Afghanistan of any safe havens that are there that could threaten you, us, or any other country.
I'm sure, Ambassador, that you are a lifelong observer of China, and especially in this current post here in Washington, but also when you're ambassador to Japan in Tokyo for a few years as well, going back to 2017, you were able to observe the relations of both countries with China and how they're shifting. Randall Sword of Santa Fe Council on International Relations in New Mexico is asking, how strong is Pakistan's relationship with China?
China is a very close friend of Pakistan. China is a trusted friend of Pakistan. And we have a close relationship. Now, if this question is being asked in relative terms, then I think I'll have to frame my response differently, because clearly, we are in a place and a position where we really don't want our relationship to be judged through the prism of another relationship. We have maintained important relationships with countries that are very different. I mean, you would be, and your listeners would also be surprised to hear that I, as Pakistan's ambassador here in Washington, also represent the Iranian interests in the United States of America. And we have done that consistently over the last 42 years. And we are also a country that has very close relationship with both Saudi Arabia and UAE and other countries in the Middle East. We have one of our largest worker presence in those countries also. So we basically, with China, the relationship is important, but so is our relationship with the United States. As you said in the beginning, as you said, I mean, this is the 75th year of our relationship. And this relationship has seen, highs and lows. We were the most allied of the allies, and we were also declared as a frenemy. Only yesterday, 21st of February, I don't know how many of your listeners are aware that President Nixon actually met Chairman Mao Zedong on 21st February 1972. And this was basically something that happened after that historic visit that Dr. Henry Kissinger took, which was facilitated by Pakistan. So for us, even when we were the most allied of allies and both member of SEATO and CENTO, we had good relationship and partnership with China. Today, we have a good partnership and relationship with China as much as we have a good and important relationship with the United States of America. And then I really do want to make that point.
Well, we do have a questioner who did put his finger on the relativity of that. And Raja Usama Asad is asking, does Pakistan and China's close relationship affect the ties between Pakistan and the US? And how do you see Pakistan and perhaps other countries in its neighborhood in Asia, South Asia, having to choose sides on, and what issues would they choose sides on?
Oh, I think, and you've lived and seen it from Japan also, where I think the Chinese presence is much bigger politically and historically than in our part of the world. But I think it's going to be a challenge, and that's where I think next 5 to 10 years are going to be absolutely critical, because we have repeatedly said this that Pakistan doesn't want camp politics, because being allied with the United States, if you look at where we are, we have India, where now we've been seeking trade normalization, but because of the state of the relationship, it's not really, unfortunately, going anywhere. We have Afghanistan that has been, to begin with, a victim of Cold War, and then subsequently the post-Cold War, I would say the second hot war that the United States had in our part of the world. Then we have Tehran or Iran, where they have been under sanctions for the past 40 years. And then that has really constricted, and China. Now, if we were to see world in black and white, in being part of this or that camp. We will essentially constrict the space for our economic development and growth. And the new security policy that Pakistan has promulgated really prioritizes the economic growth and progress of our people. And we, for that, we want peace within and peace without. And that's not just going to be a challenge for Pakistan, because our trade relationship may still be much smaller than many ASEAN countries. So how far a kind of a hard alliance or reliving the Cold War in this globalized world is practical and possible? I think that theory is going to be put to test. How far the sanctions, perhaps in the old times, you sanction one country because they were not trading or investing or working with other countries. It was much easier to maintain those sanctions and to hold them. But now it will be tough. It will be a challenge for any country. So for us, as I said, it's very clear because, United States even today is our largest export destination. The United States is the third or fourth, depending on the year we are looking at, remittance provider to Pakistan. United States is the largest non-debt related inflow source for Pakistan. United States is home to one of the largest diaspora, Pakistani diaspora, anywhere in the world. And in terms of education, in terms of their influence, both back home and over here, I don't think any other diaspora matches that. You have also been one of the top 5 investors consistently for the past 75 years. And then really, I think the challenge, and let me say this, I think this is a very important point, because if you look at these 75 years, I would say that our relationship has been essentially defined by one Cold War and 2 hot wars. And in Cold War, it was from 1947 to 1950, 1979. This was an alliance of intent, where we never really had so-called operational military coordination, except for those U-2 aircraft that flew out of Bada Bear Airport. Beyond that, the real thing started in the first hot war, which was from 79 to 87, where you had, basically supported, we actually, not you, I mean, US and Pakistan jointly supported jihad, and United States walked away. And we were there to face the consequences of what happened as a result of that war, the proliferation of weapons, proliferation of drugs, proliferation of extremism. And that, in many ways, I'm saying this candidly, influenced our choices, policy choices. And when the second hot war began, which was from 2001 onwards. Now, in the first hot war, you were able to declare victory without firing a bullet, without losing a soul, without dropping a blood point of any blood. But the second Cold War was when you put in your troops. For the first time, US had physical presence and footprint in our part of the world, and that obviously expanded your footprint even in Pakistan also. And that's where this distrust and skepticism, because we thought that once the job is done, you will leave.
You've highlighted some of the issues that Dan Krasenstein in LA and Azim Mian in New York have asked about relative alignment or misalignment with the United States. Why don't you just characterize it as, like, in the balance of the highs and lows that you referenced? Where are we? Are we neutral? Are we becoming friendly, less friendly? Where do you say? Where do you see it?
I think the relationship is more stable today than it was 6-7 years ago. Clearly, Afghanistan, frankly, was a burden for the relationship. and in many ways remained the definer-in-chief of the relationship. So the highs and lows in the situation in Afghanistan impacted our bilateral relationship, and tactical divergences led to contention, which frankly, over the last 4 years at least, have our objectives, frankly, are broadly aligned when it comes to Afghanistan. I think United States as much wants peace in Afghanistan as we do. United States doesn't want the Afghan territory to be used for terrorism against anyone. We don't want that. United States want to see human rights, women rights. We also wish that. United States wanted seamless evacuations. We have actually supported those. So the same reasons that frankly underpinned or were the basis of misunderstanding and contention between our countries. I think the manner in which we supported and facilitated the peace process, the support that we have extended, notwithstanding the fact that we don't receive any assistance. I mean, if you look at, except that we are very grateful that Pakistan is the largest recipient of COVID vaccines, which is about 57 million. But in terms of assistance, when compared to what we were getting in the past, it's less than 100 million. No military assistance. So there is lower expectation in the relationship. I think there is greater realism on both sides. And that has brought stability in the relationship, and the so-called institutional dialogue processes covering a range of issues are back in place. Starting with, of course, as soon as the Biden administration came in, we started our exchanges through telephone calls and virtual interactions between the leadership on both sides. And then our foreign minister met Secretary Blinken in New York, and that has now, and our two national security advisors have been also meeting and talking to each other regularly. With the result, today we have a climate change dialogue in place. We have an energy dialogue in place. We have a health dialogue in place. We have the trade and investment dialogue in place. We have a counterterrorism dialogue in place. On top of the regular military mill-to-mill exchanges that routinely take place between our two countries. So I would say that although, even in back home, people perhaps, because during President Trump's time, the relationship was pretty high on optics because we had like 3 back-to-back summits. Maybe the optics may not be like that, but I think there is greater stability, more predictability, and also more structured institutional engagement between Pakistan and United States today than we had during the past 4 years.
I can only have time, Ambassador Khan, to pick one of those dialogues to ask you to assess where it is, and that would be counterterrorism. And we have a question from Mohinder Gulati at World Affairs Council, Sonoma County, who wants to know, how can Pakistan talk about countering terrorism when it gives shelter to the Taliban in Pakistan? That there are elements in Pakistan that have fomented terrorism. What do you say to that question?
Well, I'd say that we have made a commitment to ourselves that we will not let our territory be used against anyone for terrorism or for any purpose. And if you go back and look at what we have achieved over the last 10 years in terms of making sure that not an inch of our territory is being abused by anyone, you have to go to our Pakistan-Afghan border and the manner in which we have cleared and cleansed the tribal areas where we were often accused of not doing enough to clear and cleanse those areas. We have also gone the extra mile in building a fence on the border, which is almost 90% complete. We have done it from our own resources, basically to address that challenge. And that challenge was not just the so-called alleged transfer or movement from our side, but there was also movement from the other side. So our position is really very clear that we don't want our territory to be used, and we are committed to upholding that commitment. And we expect everyone else in the region, in the neighborhood, because frankly, the sophistication of the recent attacks, which involved both TTP to the north and then the Baloch insurgents to the south, is a source of concern for us. And that's where we would want to work with everyone who sees these safe havens and terrorist groups as a threat. And that really, I think, is a common concern. For instance, ISIS. It is a threat as much for us as it is even for Taliban, for United States, for Iran, for Russia, and for China. And for that, everyone needs to come together. So to characterize, because, you know, Taliban being present in Pakistan, really, I mean, look at what the situation on the ground is. Even today, Central Asia has sealed their border. Those in the past who were running from the previous government took refuge in Pakistan. Today, those who are basically trying to escape or get away from Afghanistan because of Taliban are also coming to Pakistan. So we are, for all practical purposes, a natural safe haven. And that's why we are so very keen to make sure that there are no conditions that forces people to leave their homes and hearths. And we help and facilitate the realization of that. And therefore, when there is peace and stability, there are no safe havens, there are no ungoverned spaces. And that's where I think the regional countries and international community should work together.
Very good. Michael Van Den End, our executive director in the World Affairs Councils of Western Michigan, has said he would like to know, what is Pakistan doing to ease the tensions with India?
Oh, we have done all that a country can, actually. I mean, we've been making overtures, peace overtures. Our prime minister has been very consistent in saying, in seeking the resolution of all disputes, including the Jammu and Kashmir issue through dialogue. And unfortunately, India and the present BJP government has not reciprocated any of those gestures and is riding a high horse, unfortunately, not recognizing that the unilateral actions that Prime Minister Modi took in the occupied Kashmir on August 5, 2019. It's been over 2.5 years. And the people of the occupied Kashmir have rejected. Even those who were supposedly or historically even pro-India have come out very strong. Every leader. So the detentions continue, the extrajudicial killing. So people have rejected those, and somehow India doesn't seem to recognize that. And there really is no way. And not just that, you know, unfortunately, and that's a structural challenge that we face in our relationship with India today, where somehow punching Pakistan has become a part of their internal political discourse, where BJP always uses that to prop up their approval ratings. And not just that, unfortunately, now it has gone a step further, where not just Pakistan, but Muslims also have become a target. So whenever there are elections, now there were these elections in 5 important states, and we saw the emergence of this hijab controversy and the manner in which it was handled. So it's really, I think, a source of deep concern, because the Kashmir issue is not going anywhere. The Kashmiris are more determined today than they were ever before in fighting for their right of self-determination, and it is not India's internal affair. And beyond that, what they are doing to the minorities, unfortunately, poses a serious threat to peace, security, and stability. Because
Hey,
obviously,
hmm. I want to jump in because Frederick Bonnell of the Mid-Hudson Council on World Affairs is asking specifically about how Pakistan should deal with Prime Minister Modi's persecution of Muslims.
I think it's for us, it is deeply worrying because we have millions who have families, who still have relations. The persecution of minorities then also provides oxygen to extremists on our side of the border also. And India and BJP has the present leadership, as I said in the beginning, and that's where the international community, because they're clearly, the other day, there was a congressional discussion where many spoke up in seeing how the fundamental freedoms, how minority rights, how press freedoms are being eroded in India, and that it is no longer a democracy, but an authoritarian country. So for us, that happening in our neighborhood, where a country which is much bigger, a country which has claimed to be a secular country is turning and becoming getting into a straight Hindutva jacket. And that basically is being done at the expense of minorities, not just Muslims, Christians, Sikhs, and others. And in India, there are over 220 million Muslims. How would that basically impact the overall peace, security, and stability? Because if you force minorities into corner, and a number as large as they have, both as Muslims, as Christians, you are basically providing a ground for extremism. And that is what worries us. And that is what should worry everyone else also. Because those people who are forced into a corner will have no other option but to fight back. And that's the scenario that must be avoided.
Marvin Mai, very quickly on this final Kashmir question, Marvin Mai of Sonoma County asks, what is the ultimate solution for Kashmir that you see?
I think the ultimate solution is the one which is the basic solution, which is to go to the people of Kashmir, to dispose of this longest outstanding dispute on the UN Security Council agenda, consistent with the wishes of the people of Kashmir. And they were given the right of self-determination. And I think it is incumbent upon us and the international community and the United Nations to play a role in securing that right for the. We are not asking or preempting the outcome of that plebiscite, but they ought to be given, they must be given that right which we all promised to them.
It's amazing that we can spend 50 minutes on international questions and not get to domestic issues, but we will. Last question, it can't be avoided. It's the headline of the hour. And this comes to us from Dante Carver in the Pacific Palisades. What is your view of the Russo-Ukraine conflict? Speaking of dealing with authoritarian countries, how do you see what Russia is doing at the border of Ukraine and its threat?
obviously, we are concerned because any conflict, although it is not in our immediate neighborhood, but any conflict and any escalation that brings the Russia and the European countries and the United States involved in a conflict would basically have serious implications for countries around the world, for smaller countries and poor countries also, because of the economic implications and impact of the crisis. So we would want parties to de-escalate. We would want this to be resolved through negotiations and dialogue. And we do hope that diplomacy is given a chance, and there is productive diplomacy, and it doesn't really go to the next level.
Thank you. We have two questions, one from Narbeli Galindo of the International Relations Council of Kansas City, and the other from Alan Armstrong, World Affairs Council, Charleston. How has COVID-19 affected Pakistan's economy, and what are the policies that you feel have been most successful in dealing with the pandemic?
I think first of all, it's important. I think our COVID handling has been pretty well managed, and the policy, the national NCOC was created, which brought all the various players together on one platform, and that resulted in seamless coordination and also provided the policy flexibility that you need to have in tackling a crisis like the COVID. So today, Pakistan is, as I said, we are thankfully to the United States. We are the largest recipient of vaccines from United States. And one of the reasons for receiving those vaccines is that we have been able to put in place elaborate vaccine distribution mechanisms where we have the ability, as a poor country with a population of 229 million, 20 million, we have already administered over 209 million doses of vaccines. We have seen spikes, particularly the latest Omicron spike, and as a result of which, we were pretty quick in reimposing some of the restrictions. Throughout this crisis, we have managed the inflow of traffic and regulated the inflow of traffic into Pakistan. We don't let people come in without having a negative COVID tests. And there were points and time in our policy where we basically also administered tests on arrival and put people in quarantine. So all of that has, for a country of 220 million, it is just 1.5 million, although we don't do as much testing as you do here. So that's the COVID management side of it, where I think if you compare Pakistan with even other countries in the region and globally, I think Pakistan has done a pretty decent job from a country whose health and system is rather fragile. On the economic front also, for us, the timing could not have been worse, I must say, because the new government, when it came into power, they had introduced a slew of measures, economic measures, tough measures, politically unpopular measures and steps that a government has to undertake to put the economic reform on track. They did that. And as we were waiting to see the results of those decisions and the reform measures, unfortunately, COVID struck. So that threw a spanner in the works. So the dividends of those tough measures were not actually translated into dividends for common people also. But luckily, our economic contraction was not as worse as was the case for a number of countries in the region. we came up with 1.3 trillion rupees of a social protection program for an economy of our size, which covered over 13 million Pakistanis in providing them that relief and support during those times. Now we have basically got the latest IMF tranche also. Our economic numbers, we got that health certificate from international financial institutions as well. Our growth numbers and growth projections are more than what was originally envisaged. So on the whole, I would say that our economy is back on track. Our exports are expanding. Our foreign exchange reserves are going up. International financial institutions are increasingly confident about Pakistan's inflation is a challenge everywhere. We have seen worst phases in the context of inflation in the past. It's still a challenge, but it is relatively under control.
I apologize to this participant whose name I might mispronounce, but Shanta Tangia has asked, how is Pakistan keeping up on the UN Sustainable Development Goals commitments?
Well, I think as a developing country, we face a number of challenges in terms of focusing on pursuing our economic and development priorities. And for that and that reason alone, as I said in the beginning, the new national security policies conceives a comprehensive security framework where working on these sustainable goals, where frankly in the past our record has been mixed because of a number of factors, and providing safe drinking water, providing basic health, meeting basic health needs, dealing with basically transmittable diseases is a challenge. And we are allocating more resources to health, we are allocating resources to education, and we do hope that in this cycle where SDGs are basically the measure and criteria, our performance will be better than what it was in the context of achieving the Millennium Development Goals.
In the couple minutes we have left, here's a question from Richard Eastburn related to that. Describe the support for women's education, leadership, and raising a family or pursuing careers in Pakistan. There have been some interesting developments on women's issues recently. Maybe you'd like to talk about a couple of them.
Oh, well, again, I think somehow, let me say this, that the perception that many people here have of Pakistan, because the center and focus of attention has been Afghanistan consistently for the past 20 years, we are unfortunately seen as a society perhaps very similar to the situation in Afghanistan. I think Pakistan has a vibrant female presence in almost every sector of our society and of our economy, be it in the parliament, be it in the judiciary. We just had one of our first Supreme Court judges appointed, a female judge. We have had ministers, we have had our prime minister, and these are not isolated. I mean, you go down because sometimes people say that, oh, really, because these are dynasties and they got it there because of their name and not because of their gender. But there are now women parliamentarians coming from open constituencies. There are fighter pilots in our Air Force. There are special commandos in the police force. There are, people, women in every walk of life. Some of our top journalists, top anchors are women. So in that regard, I think Pakistan, and structurally and institutionally, I can tell you that there is no discrimination whatsoever. Even in the Ministry of Foreign Affairs, we, as compared to some even developed countries, I would say, even compared with Japan, maybe we have more female ambassadors serving as Pakistan's ambassador than or even other under secretaries or the secretaries to the government of Pakistan. So that perception really, I think, is dated, is wrong. While there are conservative families who would probably not want to send their daughters to far off schools, but so far as women education is concerned, for any parent, that is a priority. And I cannot even recall or think of any parent in Pakistan anywhere not wanting to educate their kids, particularly the girls.
Ambassador, we're at time and I have so many questions left. I wonder if you would consider answering one or two more, or do you, is that okay? I feel one is an important issue and one I'd like to ask of you. This is from an anonymous attendee who asks, can Ambassador Khan give an update on the religious freedom within Pakistan, a non-secular Islamic state? For example, can Ahmadiyas, etc., practice their faith and rise up to positions of leadership?
Well, first of all, yes, there is nothing that bars any minority from practicing, and these are constitutional protections provided in our constitution. One. Secondly, I think a lot is said about religious freedoms in Pakistan. And I really would like to draw a comparison. I mean, look at what is happening in Pakistan and look at what is happening in India. A pastor is killed by terrorists. The Prime Minister of Pakistan comes out and speaks in as clear terms as he can in condemning the incident. He sends his special assistant to personally condole with the family. Any incident happening today, our leadership is speaking up very clearly, very loudly for all minorities. And that, I think, in societies like ours is very important, where leadership has to come out. You tell me of what is happening next door in India. Not that that should be the measure or yardstick, but I'm just giving. We hardly ever hear, because Pakistan is a country of particular concern, India is not. Why not? Because there is lynching. There are, the cow vigilantism, love jihad, all of that is going on over there. In Pakistan, our Supreme Court has spoken not once, but several times now, very loudly, very clearly, in laying out the parameters of how some of those laws need to be enforced and need to be implemented and need to be applied by the subordinate judiciary in Pakistan. Our law enforcement, and as you can see, while there may have been many cases where blasphemy sentences were handed down, but none of those sentences have been executed or upheld by the superior judiciary in Pakistan. So those, similarly, in most cases, those incidents have evoked, for instance, the one involving a Sri Lankan citizen. I mean, I can't recall another time in our history where everyone came out, everyone felt bad, everyone felt angry at the way that incident happened. And people spoke and the country came together. So that's, I think, really what should be the measure of seeing a society's response, a leadership's response, and the law enforcement mechanisms. Obviously, there is a history to these laws, and there are political sensitivities attached to that. But the point is that we have, and our leadership has, even in terms of making those symbolic gestures of going to Diwali to stand in solidarity with our Hindu brothers and sisters in Pakistan, to go to Christmas to stand in solidarity with our Christian brothers and sisters, So these gestures, they may not really look very significant sitting here in Washington, D.C., but in our context and in our region's context, they are pretty significant. And so we are clear and we are determined to make sure that all the freedoms that are provided there and laid out in the Constitution of Pakistan are executed and enforced.
I really appreciate that answer, and it's a question we should bring to your counterparts from other countries in South Asia for sure. Just to finish then, Ambassador Khan, you're about to conclude your post here. I wonder what's next for you, and also what you feel as you look back on 75 years of the U.S.-Pakistani relationship, so many of them that you've been active in stewarding as a diplomat. What do you feel is your greatest accomplishment in your career, and where do you go next?
Well, I go next to Brussels. So this is that classic out of the fry pan into the fire. So I will go as Pakistan's ambassador to the European Union, to Belgium, and to Luxembourg. And then that process is on, and hopefully I'll be making my move in some time. The time frame is still not decided. But obviously, serving here in Washington, D.C. and carrying my country's flag has been the greatest honor and privilege, not just for me. I think for any diplomat, coming out as ambassador to United States is as good as it can get in the world of diplomacy for any foreign office establishment. So it's been, and I have had that privilege more than once, actually. I served as acting ambassador. I was here as deputy chief of mission. And over the years, I have at all the various levels in our government served on and for this relationship. And I am personally invested in a close and a very strong partnership. And that really, there is, I mean, if we were to leave aside all the prisms through which we tend to see, I think there is a very strong and compelling case for a close and mutually beneficial partnership, because Pakistan is a significant country in its own right. Pakistan is a strategically located country in its own right. Pakistan has those linkages that would make it a so-called like-minded country. We may not be as ideal of a democracy as perhaps you are also, although on that score also there is a lot of debate going on even in this country and the rest of the world. But by the standards that we have in the part that we belong, I think Pakistan has a vibrant media. Pakistan has an independent judiciary. Pakistan has an active civil society. Pakistan's parliament and Pakistan's democracy is jealously guarding its freedoms. How far they succeed, that's another story, but that's there. That has been part of our political fabric. So that, and not just that, we are also one of the largest English-speaking countries in the world, with all kinds of linkages, I mean, Fulbright scholarship, we are the largest Fulbright recipient of the Fulbright scholarship in the world. And our civil service, our military, they because of being an English-speaking former British colony. So those linkages, our legal structures, the common law system that we follow, the litigation, the pleadings that we do, all these are things that bring us closer together. In any space, it is much easier for two individuals from United States and Pakistan to engage in a conversation that would not sound Greek to each other. And so these are what makes me convinced that there is a future for this relationship, that we must work together for our people, because unfortunately our relationship has always been against something. It was against communism. It was against Soviet invasion. It was against terrorism. I think it's about time that we have a relationship for our people and for our countries. And I believe that I have been able to make a humble contribution in moving that discourse and putting the relationship on that track by bringing our people. And I think in all of this, our diaspora has to play an important role. And they are playing an important role. They are the most important and critical bridge between our two countries, and we should continue to rely on that.
Well, I hope your successor has the same view, and that he or she, I think it's a he, will be doing that work to engage the diaspora and our countries for the betterment of peace and prosperity. Good luck in your next post. I hope to see you before you leave.
I think we must.
We have sushi to catch up on. Thank you so much again, Dr. Asad Majeed Khan, Ambassador of the Islamic Republic of Pakistan, for spending time over an hour with us on Embassy Row Live. To my colleagues around the Council Network, thank you for joining us. This is Bill Clifford in Washington. Really appreciate your engagement today.
Thank you very much. And through you, I'd like to thank all the World Affairs Council across the United States for having hosted me in different places over the years. Thank you so much.